Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest Mara Glatzel, who's here to share with us her new book, Needy: How to Advocate for Your Needs and Claim Your Sovereignty. So welcome to the show, Mara Glatzel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What a joy it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. What inspired you to even write this?
Well, this has been the body of my work with my clients over the course of the last 5, maybe 8 years. And what I kept hearing from them, first, I was working with people individually. What I kept hearing from them was, we need to be having these conversations. You're the only person that I know who's talking about needs neutrally, nonetheless positively. And so I started putting them together in communities, and we did that work in a group format. And I am happy to say that, unlike 8 years ago, we are talking more and more about needs now. But I want to facilitate more of that conversation because we are humans. We have needs, and yet so many of us are so afraid to be seen as needy.
Yes, usually when you hear the word needy, that just gives a picture of someone that, is unable to have any kind of self-regulating control, or maybe they're just a little bit over the top.
Yeah, it's true. And, I'd argue that the needs aren't the problem. And really, that picture of neediness that we all conjure happens more often when we try to pretend that we don't have needs. And we're humans. All of us have needs. That's an indisputable fact of living in a human body. But when we try to not have needs, when we try to suppress parts of ourselves or partition off parts of ourselves in order to belong or be in the relationships that we long for or the workplace that we've worked hard to get to, it comes out some way, right? And we try sometimes to offload those needs onto the people around us. We hope that they'll just know what we need, that they'll be able to read our minds, or worse, that because they don't just seem to just know and they don't just give us what we need, that maybe we don't deserve what we need anyway. And we get into this mess of not having our needs met and feeling them kind of bubble up inside of us. And that's not really about the needs. It's about how we've been conditioned not to have them. And the more that we're able to embrace our needs and have a working understanding of what is even possible to need, then the more often we're going to get our needs met and the less kind of quote unquote needy we're going to be.
Do you feel that people often marginalize their own needs because not only is it they don't want to appear needy, but it seems like even though we talk a lot about self-care, it could seem like it's just too much.
Yeah. And it can be, right? It can be overwhelming. Most of us are overcommitted in a multitude of directions. And so taking care of ourselves feels like just another thing on the bottom of a very, very long list. But I think that when we develop a working understanding of what we need, we are able to care for ourselves in ways that's far more satisfying than we may be otherwise. So without needs, what is that care really doing? Right? We may have found a list of things to do to care for ourselves, or we may have heard of a really good idea or listened to a podcast, and we're trying to replicate somebody else's process. That version of self-care is prescriptive and not responsive. When you are in relationship with yourself, when you are in dialogue with what you need, which is another way of saying what you require in order to exist and in order to thrive, when you're in relationship with yourself in that way, then you're able to care for yourself based on the data that you're receiving about what you require in the context of that moment of your life. And your self-care is that much more satisfying because it meets that specific need versus being this overarching Band-Aid. So often I hear from people that they're doing all of the things, I'm air quotes, doing all of the things, but they don't feel relief. They don't feel satisfied. They don't feel as though the self-care that they're working with is working for them. And so they want to just throw the whole thing away and move on to the next thing on their list. And so I think that when we slow down enough to build that relationship with ourselves and to really have a better understanding of what we need, we are able to care for ourselves in ways that's far more effective and far more satisfying.
So, when we start, do we make a list of our needs and wants by what's most important?
I think that the best place to start is to develop a practice of asking yourself what you need in the morning of every day. And part of what can be frustrating, I think, for people about needs is that we don't just need the same things all of the time. We are humans in flux. Our needs relate to the circumstances of our lives, the circumstances of our experience in that moment in our physical body, the patterns that we've set up in our relationships. And so the most important piece is to have it be a conversation and to get into the practice of that. Because then we're able to focus in. Sure, over the course of time, you're going to notice there's trends. There are things that I need based on certain circumstances that arise in my life. Like right now, I have a lot on my plate. So I know what I need, generally speaking, when I have a lot on my plate. But having that practice of checking in with yourself and asking what you need and caring what the answer is essential to getting to the bottom of what it is that you might require. Most of us have pretty limited scopes when it comes to thinking about what we need. We might think about our physical needs and, I need food, I need water, I need rest, I need, I don't know, to move my body maybe. But we don't have an understanding of our emotional needs oftentimes, or our spiritual needs. And so this begins with a conversation with yourself. What do I need? What do I need? Genuinely asking, genuinely getting curious. And I do this in maybe 2 minutes in the morning. It's not, a huge, heavy morning practice, but getting into the routine of checking in with yourself before you check in with your to-do list will help you to have more data about how to care for yourself in that way.
I love that. It really is kind of having it all open where we can look at all the different pieces that we need to accomplish or we're needing.
Yeah, sometimes, and sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes like I need breakfast. Or I need to take a shower. I need to go for a walk outside in the fresh air. And sometimes it's going to be more complex. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that the moment we identify a need, we're supposed to be able to meet it. That really cuts off the conversation, because if we rightly know that we don't have the capacity to meet that need, say we have questions about whether or not our relationship is right for us. That's a big question. Or I might need more space, or I might need more physical closeness, or I might need whatever it might be. Things that are harder to ask for. We're allowed to have unmet needs that go on. And we can still be in that conversation even as we acknowledge, hey, I'm tracking that, it's on my radar, but I don't have the capacity to get into that right now. Or I don't feel brave enough to have that conversation. Or I'm not sure even what I want to do in that area of my life. So just because you identify a need doesn't mean you need to rush out and meet that need. And really acknowledging that opens up a lot of space too, because it gives us that permission to be curious and to have open-ended questions that we might be considering or thinking about for a period of time before we come to a decision or something that we want to ask for. And removing that pressure of the minute you identify something, you better get out and do it. Or what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're wasting your energy. You're wasting your life. All of those messages that we get about taking our time. Sometimes we need that buffer to really figure out where we stand on an issue in our lives.
In your book, you talk about taking radical responsibility for our needs. And you talk about it meaning centering ourselves with our mind, lives, and joy. So, what does that really mean?
For me, it has meant no longer living on the periphery of my life. For a lot of my adolescence and early adulthood, I was doing what I believed other people wanted me to do, which is faulty logic on a lot of points because it's based on a lot of assumptions and also on my social conditioning and the way that I was raised and all of the messages that I got over the course of my early life about what it meant to be good and thereby what it meant to belong, what it meant to feel safe. But that looked like how it tangibly looked on a daily basis was putting other people's needs ahead of my own and believing that was right and good and taking on more, saying yes to more things than I could reasonably say yes to, being a point person for all things. I was kind of relentlessly responsible, but certainly not to myself. And really this overarching pattern of bringing myself to the point of burnout over and over and over again because of how many things I was taking on without any kind of consideration to my own needs or my own energetic capacity, my own requirements for doing the thing that I had committed to do. And I think so many of us are like this. We have more things on our list than one human could ever do in any given day. We say yes for reasons that are known and unknown to us, even when we want to say no. And we believe that it's supposed to be hard. We tell ourselves like, oh yeah, I'm struggling, but so is everybody. I'm muscling through, I'm pushing past myself, but so is everybody. I'm putting my needs on the back burner on end, but that's just what it means to be an adult. And centering yourself in your own life is really taking responsibility for the fact that you are the vessel for everything that you do. So, if you care about, I have 2 young children, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. If I care about their experience in relationship with me, if I care about what energy I'm bringing to my partnership, if I care about my work, my writing, if I care about all of the boards that I'm on or all of the committees that I serve on, if I care about those things, I have to care about myself because I'm the vessel for that work. If I tap out or am empty, then immediately everything that I'm working on, everything that I care about, everything that I may have formerly put ahead of my own needs becomes completely unsustainable because I'm the vessel for that work. And if I'm not in good working order, then I don't have anything to offer those things that I care about. And so I think it's a reorientation in this way of just how we understand our capacity for doing things, that it's finite, that there is a bottom to it, that if we want to bring that sustainability, that stabilization to how we are conducting ourselves, we have to take ourselves into consideration. We are rapidly burning out. And that is of service to no one. And it's not of service to ourselves either. So I think we need to really reinvent how we're thinking about caring for ourselves and not seeing it as this really nice thing that we do sometimes if we have the time or the money. And instead thinking about how when we care for ourselves, that is an act of service because it is making everything else in our lives as sustainable as possible.
Now, is that part of the, like previous beliefs or beliefs a person has that kind of keeps them blocked from being able to reach this point of addressing their own needs?
Yeah, I think needs are tender things because we all carry stories about not having our needs met, not having our needs matter. And it can be tricky to begin sifting through some of those stories as we are intentionally bringing our needs to the forefront of our lives, because it might feel there may be grief there for you. You may wonder, why weren't my needs met when I was a child? Why didn't anyone care what I needed? Or think about relationships where your needs weren't even a part of the conversation, or friendships that you had where people were happy to have you around when you were doing something for them, but not happy to have you around when you needed anything. And it can be tender to do this work, but it's necessary. And so I think that part of why I believe so much in having these public conversations about needs is that it gives voice to that tender part too. So many of us think, well, it's just me, right? It's just me. Everyone else in the world is getting their needs met. Everyone else in the world's partner cares about their needs. Everyone else in the world, has it easier than me for this, that, or the other reason. And so the more that we're able to talk about this, the more that we're able to realize, wow, okay, this is a struggle that a lot of people have, particularly a lot of people who are in caregiving positions. Parents, teachers, nurses, mental health care practitioners, professions where you are taught that your job is to be of service, and that the more that you can be of service, making yourself as small as possible is what it means to do a good job. And so the more that we can have these conversations and talk about what it means to be well and how that impacts our ability to do the job, and maybe we're doing a little bit less, but we're able to serve the people that we serve in better ways and for longer times. We have to be able to have those conversations, and having them publicly is such a balm for the parts of us that may worry or wonder if we're the only ones who are dealing with that.
Now, in your book, you talk about self-acceptance. How does that play a part in all this?
So I remember a long time ago that I really associated self-acceptance with stagnation, that I was reluctant to accept myself because I thought that the thing that was keeping me in working order, the thing that was, keeping me accountable and productive was beating myself up and kind of reminding myself daily of all of the ways that I wasn't meeting my own expectations or other people's expectations, and relating to myself in this cruel push-pull kind of way. And I thought, well, if I just accept myself, nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to get anything done. I don't know what will become of me, but it's certainly not going to be good. And we resist this self-acceptance, I think, because we hold on so tight to the belief that if we become better than we are, our lives will be different and our lives will be what we want them to be. And we hold that as the starting point for the work. It's like, once I work myself to a place of self-acceptance, it will be easier for me to be able to take care of my needs. So, the self-acceptance comes first, and then everything naturally follows. You're working really hard while you're simultaneously kind of resisting this idea of self-acceptance because you haven't gotten there yet where you've earned it. And earning it, of course, is a moving target. And so we're working, putting our care on the other side of that thing, and then the next thing. Because it's not about the thing itself, of course, it's a pattern of putting your care on the other side of whatever it is you're working on because you believe you have to earn it. Your own care, everyone else's care. And in Needy, I make the case for really turning that pattern on its head. And I talk about how radical self-responsibility informs responsive self-care. It helps us take care of ourselves. It builds self-trust. And with time, that self-trust blossoms into something like self-acceptance, maybe self-love. Self-love can feel like a stretch for some people, but I'm willing to put it on the table. And so instead of it being the thing that opens the door, we see it as I am building a relationship with myself, much the same way as I would build a relationship with somebody else, where I'm showing up, I'm doing what I said that I was going to do, I'm building that trust. And over time, those feelings of warmth and acceptance and love build naturally out of that sense of trust that's been built naturally out of those acts of care. And I will say that, the starting point for so much of the self-care conversation is do it because you love yourself. And I frankly don't care if you even like yourself. I don't think you need to like yourself to take care of yourself. I'm not so worried about whether or not we like ourselves or why we don't like ourselves. I mean, I can come up with so many very valid reasons why you might feel that way about yourself. But this book starts with taking care of yourself, whether or not you like yourself, whether or not you want to. Taking care of yourself because you are a human being in a human body. Human bodies require care, and that's a fact. We cannot run on empty. That's a fact. And yeah, so I think I was chasing that for such a long time myself, for that perfect kind of epiphany of, oh, now I accept myself and now I've earned my way to taking up more space in my own life, or somebody else has somehow pointed me back in the direction of my needs. And I'm laughing because, well, that moment's not coming. And so if that moment's not coming, what then, right? How can we rethink how we relate to ourselves? How can we earn our own trust? How can we grow those feelings of self-acceptance and self-love, even if we don't feel them right now?
Well, that's, I think, the $1 million question right there, right? How do we grow self-love? And you're so right. I mean, so many of the times people just have a tough time getting to that. They might love everybody else, but loving themselves, I mean, that's a leap.
Yeah, it is a leap. And I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, not to make that leap right away. Think about it like, how can I build this relationship with myself? So we talked about that daily check-in, and that's the beginning of the conversation. So if you think about this as if you were having a relationship with somebody else, you would, hopefully, expect that other person to ask you questions, care about the answers, maybe put their phone down while you're talking, pay attention to you, be curious about what you need, be invested in what you need, realize it's mutually beneficial when you get your needs met for that relationship, and show up consistently, follow through doing the things that they say that they're going to do. These are the stepping stones to building a healthy and loving relationship. The problem is, when it comes to building a relationship with ourselves, first of all, we assume that we have one. But just because you are with yourself and in your own body does not mean you have a relationship with yourself. And that relationship doesn't just come online whenever you need it. If you think about this, like, I don't call a friend for months, and then I only call that friend when I'm moving and I need somebody to help haul boxes, when I have a problem that I need an answer to, when I want something from that relationship. With time, that friend's going to stop picking up my call. And for many of us, our bodies, our emotional selves have stopped picking up the call because we only show up to that relationship with ourselves to beat ourselves up for not being good enough, or we have complaints about our body, how it looks, or, oh, it's January 1st, it's resolution time, and, we haven't done anything. Now we have to kind of beat ourselves up to come up with these new resolutions to change ourselves in the new year. And so when we think about actually building a relationship with ourselves, it takes time, and it takes intention, and it takes attention. It takes asking yourself how you're doing and genuinely caring what the answer is. It takes being willing to change the course of your day based on your physical or lived experience. It requires flexibility. It requires really believing that you're allowed to put yourself on your own calendar very tangibly. And that relationship is built rebuilt. That trust is rebuilt over the course of time. And so I think there are a lot of reasons why we don't trust ourselves. There's a lot of reasons why the relationship that we have with ourselves is fractured. And all of those are very important to get into, but they're not prerequisites for taking better care of yourself. And that's the most important point, because digging into the past hurts that you carry requires energy. And in order for you to have energy, in order for you to have stamina, you have to have some of your basic physical needs met. And so if we stop thinking about, I'm going to pour myself a glass of water after I figure out all of the reasons why it's so hard for me to remember to drink water every day, and just get up, walk over, and pour ourselves a glass of water. We can do both things, but we don't have to figure it all out before we start taking care of ourselves.
What do you find are some of the common needs that people really tend to ask for?
I think that very commonly we are always looking for ways to feel safe, and through feeling as though we belong. So those are two big needs, safety and belonging. And we, generally speaking, this is where we get tangled up, because we need other things too. We need sustenance, we need rest, we need hydration, we need to move our bodies. And so many people will say, I know that I need those things, but I'm just not doing it. And so while I think those needs are quick to come to mind, the needs that I'm most interested in are the root of the reasons why you're just not doing those things. And I think a lot of times that comes down to belonging and safety. So I push past myself, or I make myself small because I want to belong. In the workplace, that might mean taking on more work than you can reasonably do in any given day or any given week. It might mean saying yes to things that you don't want to say yes to, or pushing yourself past the point of burnout in order to be seen as doing a good job. So you want to belong in that workplace. You feel safe, of course, because that workplace offers you the financial ability to pay for your house, pay for food, pay for the things that you need. But the problem is that there's a lot of false assumptions that are baked in about what is required in order to belong. And if you walk it all the way back, you realize that when we're children, when we're babies, we need to belong to our families of origin to keep us safe. Absolutely, right? We need to be taken care of. And so belonging is essential. But as we grow up, we start to notice that we might be trying to belong to the people around us, to the communities around us, at the expense of belonging to ourselves. And it might feel safe, might feel like, if I can get into this relationship, or we could get married, or, I can reach this milestone, or I can get that promotion, that's going to be the thing that keeps me safe. But when we're bypassing meeting our own need for belonging, we are rooting that need through something external to us, which makes it, shaky at best. And so the more that we're able to really work on being in relationship with ourselves, work on belonging to ourselves, work on noticing where we might be diminishing or pushing past ourselves in order to earn favor, earn external validation, earn applause, the more that we can investigate those things, the stronger that self-belonging becomes. And that piece of knowing I have my own back and I'm not going to abandon myself no matter what is the closest thing to safety that I've found personally. And we come by these things honestly. I think that's a really crucial thing to keep in mind, is that we are doing the best that we can all of the time. And as we begin to rebuild our relationship with ourselves, we can make different choices. But wherever it is that you are right now, however you are trying to meet those needs for belonging and for safety, you came by that honestly. And you can enter into conversation with yourself at that point. Like, why am I so hesitant to ask for what I need in this relationship? Why am I so apt to take on more work than I'm reasonably able to do for this job? Why do I routinely trespass against my own boundaries within this friendship? Why am I so afraid to ask for what I want and need? What do I think is going to happen if I do? The more that we start asking those questions, the more that we are fostering that sense of self-belonging and really meeting that belonging need, really meeting that safety need. I'm very familiar with the feeling myself of being a people pleaser, being a recovering people pleaser, I'll say. I'm very familiar with the feeling of quote unquote belonging to a group of people and feeling so lonely because I know that those people don't really know me. They know the version of me that I have created for them based on what I assumed was expected. And so many of us are doing this and we are experiencing loneliness. We're experiencing the number of clients who I work with who are most afraid. The number one person that they're most afraid of asking for what they want and need is their partners because it feels so risky. It feels like, well, if this person rejects me or if this person, doesn't want to renegotiate these boundaries or doesn't want to show up and help me meet this need, then I don't think I'll be able to bear it. And so it's tender. And I recommend starting with a place in your life that feels the most comfortable. Like I said before, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to have the hardest conversations first. You can start in lower test ways, less risky ways that enable you to gain your confidence as you ask for what you want and need and build up to having some of those bigger conversations.
Is there a core wound that most people tend to have that is kind of what gets us stuck on a track of not really trusting ourselves and being able to give ourselves what we need?
Yes and no. I'm sure that there are variations to this, but the core wound that I experience myself is that I'm not good enough as I am. And that is one that I hear a lot from my clients and in having these conversations over the last 10 years. I'm not enough as I am. There's something wrong with me. If they really knew me, they wouldn't like or love me. That I somehow need to use myself to distract from this lack of enoughness that I am inside. And interestingly, that lack of enoughness is often paired up with a too muchness. So I'm not enough in a multitude of ways. And because I am deeply concerned with being found out for not being enough, I become too much, right? I'm too needy. I have too many feelings. I'm too fragile. I ask for too much. My expectations are too high. And so you're caught in this push and pull of knowing on some level that you're not good enough and knowing on some level that you're also way too much. And I think our needs get stuck in there because we push them aside so that we can prove how competent and good we are, how lovable we are, how much we deserve to belong. And they get suppressed because we think those are the things that, make us unlovable. That's like just tips the scale. It's one too many things. And it all comes down to that core wound of I'm not enough as I am, that I should be somehow other, that other people are different than me, which I do want to call into question a little bit because I think when we are having these conversations with ourselves, we're provided a view of our own inner workings that is radically different than the viewpoint that we're provided for anybody else. Even people that we're with in real time, we are being presented with a curated version of them. We are comparing our insides to somebody else's outsides all of the time. And beyond just not being our business, frankly, how anybody else is, it's not a working equation. It doesn't, we are inevitably going to be so much messier by our own estimation than we see other people, because we have that curtain pulled back and we get to where the, version of us that's sleeping on the floor, the version of us that's, or crying on the floor, the version of us that's overdrawn our bank account, the version of us that yelled at our child or didn't do that thing or did something, horribly disappointing. And so when we hold that core wound of not enoughness, it is fed by that bit of believing like I am, just not as good as other people in my life. And part of the reason that I wrote this book was to give voice to the fact that we're all human. We all make mistakes, multitude of mistakes. Whether or not you believe that somebody else makes mistakes, they do. And we also aren't privy to somebody else's inner working. I work with many people who on the outside are phenomenally competent, brilliant, celebrated, wonderful humans who are doing great work in the world. And because I work with them one-on-one, I'm able to know that we all carry these questions. We all carry this wondering of, if they really knew me, would they like me? Is it safe for me to be who and how I am? And so we diminish our needs to keep ourselves safe in that way, to not show our hand, to not be vulnerable in other people's presence, to not give them further evidence to see us as we believe ourselves to be, which is not enough.
Do you feel that most of us really need to work on setting effective boundaries to get to this place where we're really focusing on ourselves?
Yes. Yeah. I would be hard pressed to meet one person who I didn't think could use more boundaries. I think what is so often true is that we are overcommitted in so many ways. And part of that has to do with who we're making our plans for. So, we all have this ideal self that lives in our mind, and that ideal self is this perfect marriage of us on our very best day and our social conditioning. And that ideal self is able to do things that we're never quite able to do, but that's the person who we're making plans for. That's the person who sets the expectations or sets the tone. And so when we're saying yes, by and large, it's like, oh, I think I should be able to do all of these things. So I'm going to somehow just say yes and then will myself into being able to do it, which is a recipe for burnout. And so when it comes to taking up more space in your life, it's really important to realize that when you say no to something that you are not actually able to do, you're going to be able to say yes to yourself more and more and more often. And does this mean that we don't all have commitments that we may, you may not want to do everything that's on your list? Sure. I mean, we live in a world where we are accountable to multiple areas of our lives. And this doesn't mean that you're never going to do something that you don't want to do ever again. But getting curious about where you might be overcommitted, where you might be outside of your realm of responsibility, which means taking care of something that isn't yours, right? Belongs to somebody else. Doing for somebody else without being asked to do for somebody else. All of these kinds of places. Having a radical inventory, and there is an exercise for this in Needy because it's essential. And the exercise basically has you go through a series of prompts to determine what is mine and what is not mine. And that as a tool for the basis of setting these boundaries is essential because you can begin to realize where is the space that I could reclaim even a few minutes for myself out of my daily life. And beyond that, what have I said yes to that I really want to say no to? And how can I say no to those things so that I'm able to say yes to what I truly want to say yes to, right? When I ask people what they value, so often they'll tell me a multitude of things. Like I value getting outside and going for walks with my dog. I value spending family time with my kids. I value my creative pursuits. But then when I ask them to look at their calendar from last month to see if those values are reflected in how they've been spending their time, the answer is usually some very uncomfortable crickets. Now, of course, we don't put everything in our calendars, but the fact remains that for many of us, we're overextended, but not in a direction of what we value, not in a direction of working towards building a world that we want to be a part of, not in a direction towards what is most important to us, or at least what we say is most important to us. And so when we begin to take stock some of that, we might find, okay, this is a conversation that I need to have. I'm actually not able to serve on that board anymore, or I'm unable to buy any more books, or listen to any more podcasts until I've, moved through this, that, or the other thing. Those boundaries that support us in being where we are, even if just for a few minutes before running to the next thing, can help us to start having this space for these conversations and the space for beginning to meet our needs.
Do you feel that many people are just confused about what unconditional self-love means for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are sold an image of unconditional self-love that's kind of like a blanket that covers up everything that we don't want to look at. Sort of like everything's okay. Doesn't matter. Everything you do is perfect. Don't worry. And the kind of self-love that I'm talking about in this book is brave love. It's being willing to stay in the conversation and not abandoning yourself when you fail, because you will, when you disappoint yourself, because you will, when you let yourself down, because you will. And instead of this like hearts and roses sort of everything is perfect on this, in this arena of self-love, it's a willingness to stay with yourself no matter what is going on, and a willingness to remain by your own side. And that takes a different set of tools. I mean, I think that the kind of self-love that we talk about by and large just doesn't ring true for people, which is why they're suspicious of it. And so if instead we can talk about lending ourselves the compassion, the benefit of the doubt, the just even a minute of curiosity before we jump straight to judgment, that's the kind of self-love that I'm interested in. And it's relational. It's messy. It's not perfect. It's not always beautiful. Sometimes you're frustrated with yourself. Sometimes your heart's broken. Sometimes you put everything on the line for something you believed in and it failed. And you have to mine that experience for data and begin again. And it hurts. And so I don't think that this always feels good. But I'm less interested in that kind of beautiful image of unconditional self-love, and I'm more interested in a self-partnership. I'm more interested in, where do I abandon myself? Where have I learned to abandon myself? Where do I abandon myself most easily to kind of stave off rejection, or get to myself first before anyone has a chance to get a jab, or leave myself because I know I'm going to be left. All of these ways that we abandon ourselves when we get into sticky situations. What would it look like to remain by our own side, even when it's difficult? What might it look like to give ourselves the kind of love and the benefit of the doubt that we may be accustomed to giving other people, for example? And it's tender and it doesn't always feel good, But I have a lot of respect for people who are in the process of learning how to, Brene Brown calls it staying in the, or being in the arena. I have a lot of respect for people who are committed to staying in the arena with themselves, no matter what it is that's going on in their lives, no matter how many times they messed up that thing, how many times they failed, how many times they were disappointed, and just refusing to leave their own side through the process.
Where do you feel people really get hung up or stuck when it comes to being able to just take care of their own needs?
I think we overcomplicate it. I think that we carry beliefs that it needs to be a whole thing, or it needs to be perfect, or we need to be able to check off a laundry list of needs in order to have done good work. And I'm always curious about how can we do less and more often? How can we focus on what is truly doable for us on any given day? Knowing that some days we're going to have more capacity, some days we're going to have less. And so what are our non-negotiables? And how can we meet those with more consistency? And consistency can be really tricky because this can be another place where in your self-talk, you might have a tendency to break down self-trust by being really unkind to yourself when you're not perfectly, capital C, consistent. And so when I say consistency, I am not talking about doing that same thing at all costs because you're afraid not to. But instead, thinking about it in such a way that you are trying to care for yourself every single day because you require care and because it feels good, because it reinforces you, it restores you, and enables you to keep showing up in a way that's sustainable and also joyful. And so we have a tendency to make it mean a whole bunch of things. Like taking care of myself must be, this lengthy 72-point plan. And I wonder what our relationship with our needs would look like if we committed to, one, checking in with ourselves in the morning, as I've said, and two, asking, what one need can I doably meet today? Knowing that, that means some needs are going to go unmet. That's okay. Knowing that no amount of self-care in one day is able to universally pull you out of a state of burnout, right? It's the repetitive small actions on your own behalf. It's not sexy. I did not want this to be the answer myself. I will go right out and say it. I wanted the big fix because I thought I had the big problems. But what I've noticed and what I've seen with my clients is that what heals us and what reduces the amount of chronic stress that we carry, what gives us what we personally require in order to keep showing up for our lives, are these small daily actions of devoting to your own care in whatever way is doable based on the day that you have ahead.
Now, do people typically have a real difficult time receiving? Because I guess if we're like people pleasers, we're so used to giving, receiving might be a hard thing, I would think.
Absolutely. And it takes practice. It really does. Receiving's funny because I think we imagine that because it's nice to receive something, it should feel good. But as you've said, if you are orienting yourself in a way, in a people pleaser way, or orienting yourself towards taking care of others, you aren't used to having your needs met. And so it can take time. I so often hear from my clients that they asked for what they needed and then they immediately wanted to take it back. Or they were getting what they asked for and they're so uncomfortable that they wanted to walk it back and hide out. And it is uncomfortable at first. It does require practice. Part of this is because we haven't maybe received much in our lives, or we have received conditionally, where we've known that whatever it is that we say yes to, whatever it is that we accept, we're going to be call to pay back at some point. We're wary about that. So it takes practice, and it takes being willing to be with your own discomfort in service to what it is that you want and need. And it's not uncomfortable forever. And I think this practice, I in my own mind and in my practice, I talk about this as sitting on your hands, where, I can remember for myself when I had a newborn, my oldest daughter was a newborn. I just remember needing my partner to do something, and I had to wake them up, and it was the middle of the night, and I was already awake, but I was just so tired. I had been up for so many hours, and the baby didn't need anything from me. And so, I woke my partner up, and I was just lying in bed, literally laying on my hands tucked underneath my legs, just lying in bed thinking, well, why did I ask for that? I'm awake now because I feel so uncomfortable. Why did I ask for that? I could have just, but I couldn't. And it was right for me to ask for what I needed. And feeling uncomfortable doesn't mean it wasn't right to ask for what I needed. And with time, asking becomes more and more comfortable. You're able to see the benefit on your own life, the benefit on your relationships when you welcome yourself into them. And it takes practice. But what is essential is that we don't read the presence of our own discomfort as meaning we should back it up and take it back and never ask for what we need again, right? Instead, I would be curious to ask, what do I need when I'm uncomfortable? It's okay to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel uncomfortable when you're doing this work much of the time. So what do I need when I'm uncomfortable? What soothes me? What holds me? What reminds me that it's okay to have needs, that it's okay to ask for my needs to be met? So, long answer, but yes, absolutely receiving is uncomfortable.
Well, Mara, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah, well, I love to hang out on Instagram. You can find me at Mara Glatzel. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter, I have a quiz. What do you need? You can find that over at maraglatzel.com. And if you want to know more about the book, Needy, you can find that at maraglatzel.com/book.
Well, Mara, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Well, thank you, Mara. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Needy: How to Advocate for Your Needs and Claim Your Sovereignty. On that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.